Good morning, theology class. Hope you enjoyed your long weekend. Trust that you took Monday off. Let us know in the comments section if you did, in fact, take advantage of your long weekend and what is something fun that you did. Perhaps we'll leave another little note on a comment at the end of this video as well, just to keep you honest. For now, here are expectations for April 14th through 17th, a theology of work. You're going to read another couple pages in the Sayers essay called Why Work, pages 5 to 7. It's basically at the very bottom of page 5. You're going to begin with the question, what is the Christian understanding of work? And stop, I think this actually bleeds onto page 8, stop when you get to, quote, in nothing has the church so lost her hold on reality. That's still in RenWeb, and I will add it to this week's email as well. So read those couple pages. It's not too oppressive. And then you're going to write another full page. You guys did quite a good job on last week's writing about the way that World War II transformed people's understanding of work. I was very pleased. That was excellent, and I hope you learned something. This week, I want you to engage with this question. What is the Christian understanding of work? And how does that contrast with society's typical understanding of work? Write one full page as if it were a double-spaced document. Now, Sayers gets into, eventually, a little bit in this section and a little bit in the next section, some different Christian understandings of work. And I really want you to engage with what she says here. Don't just spit out the cheesy Sunday school answer just because you think it might be right. I really want you to engage with what she says, because she's offering that there's a bad understanding of what Christian work is, and there's a good one, a biblical one. So I think this will help you tremendously as you think about the work that you're going to be doing when you get out of high school and or college. So some reading, some writing. Email that to me by Friday the 17th at 3 p.m. This is the video for the week. And make sure you leave that comment at the end. Just a bit of a reminder of sort of the big picture, where we're heading. We talked a little bit the first go round about some heresies of work. It needs to be survived, endured. It's kind of a necessary evil. It's given to us for our reputation, or a means to leisure, or as a means to some other end. Rather, those being heresies, work has inherent design by God, because God is the chief worker in the universe. He is the one from whom we get our paradigm for what work is. So we looked a little bit about some false views of work and the way that God designed work in the garden before sin as something good and meaningful for our fulfillment, not just as something to get paid and to get to the next thing, to get to the leisure, but as something designed by God for us to live meaningful lives, joining Him in cultivating the earth. This week, we're going to look at a very much related topic, kind of flows from the design of work, but what we're going to call the dignity of work. And Keller has some helpful thoughts in his chapter on this section, as well as does Dorothy Sayers, which you're going to read this week. First, I want you to reflect on a little bit of a question. Regarding the sort of usefulness of someone's work, I want you to imagine two people who are in the same building. A hotel custodian and a traveling CEO who is paying to stay in one of the hotel rooms that this custodian works at. Which one of them has the more important work? the CEO or the custodian, the maid? Your answer to this question gets at what you believe about the dignity of work. I suspect most of us, way deep down, would view a CEO as doing more important, bigger, better work than your average maid. But I'm going to propose something a little bit different. We sort of have this idea that different forms of work have greater or lesser dignity depending on what they are. Typically what we do is we exalt the mind, a work that would seem to use more of the mind. It's more intellectual work as superior to more menial, material, hands in the dirt kind of work. And I think that is entirely unbiblical. I may point you back to a passage we read last week. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." This is a reminder that we work because God works, and God made us to work before the fall. And he made, the key point here, I think, is that he made all kinds of work that move out into the world and subdue it, work it, make it fruitful, engage with it, and tinker away with the world that God has made to produce beauty and order and goodness. So we see here in Genesis no sort of caste system for certain kinds of work that are better and certain kinds of work that are lesser. Rather, we see God injecting work, making work with an inherent dignity. Work has an inherent dignity to it. But, as I said before, we tend to prize and value work that primarily uses the intellect and the mind as more valuable than simple manual labor. This is evident obviously by the fact that we pay more intellectual, higher skilled laborers more than lower skilled laborers, and there may be something to that. There are reasons why certain jobs are paid more, but I'm going to propose that there's a more underlying dignity to work that is common to all work, so that the one preparing food in the restaurant has the potential to do work that is just as fundamental, just as meaningful, just as dignified as the President of the United States. Another sort of false view of the dignity of work might be that the more one advances in the workplace, the further removed from the material world he or she becomes. So we want to try to distance ourselves from the sort of material, laborious tasks and advance higher up in the workplace, which can be good. Management is necessary to make work run well, but the false view that underlies this idea is that we may seem to think that the sort of higher we get on the work ladder, and the more we distance ourselves from the more menial tasks, then the more significant is our work. And that tends in our minds to kind of teach us or make us think that ordinary, manual labor kind of relegates human beings to the animal level, and we've in our society kind of created what you might call a knowledge class versus a labor class, a knowledge class versus labor class. And all of these things are demonstrations that we do not understand that all work, from the most skilled to the least skilled, from high management to everyday menial labor, has inherent and in some sense equal dignity from the Lord. You could say this comes from the fact that in the Garden of Eden, human beings are given what you might could call, we would call it a job, but you might better call it an office in creation. Not the animals, not the plants, but human beings are given what we might could call an office. Look in verse 26. Let them, that is, human beings, have dominion. Verse 28. Be fruitful, subdue the earth, have dominion. These are what theologically we could call an office that God is giving to us in creation, and that office is that of the worker. As bearers of God's image, we are his, you might say, his ruling representatives on earth. We subdue what he has made. We even see, in some kind of anthropomorphic sense, that God here himself, God is a gardener, and we know that Christ was a carpenter. We join God, even as God himself works, as workers with an inherent dignity. That dignity is present because it's something that God does. We do it in his place, in his stead, called by him to join him as his representative partners in working and cultivating the earth. I think about how this contrasts with the way that our society tends to approach work. Sayers says, at present, we have no clear grasp of the principle that every man, every woman should do the work for which he is fitted by nature. You see, if God has made all work that isn't like actively sinful work, if God has made all work with an inherent dignity, then that means we ought to approach our work pursuing work that is fitting for us, work that fits the way that God made us, right? We don't need to pursue work that's higher up on the ladder for its own sake. We don't need to despise work that would seem to be more manual and menial. Rather, we can actually choose work that fits us by nature. We tend, I would say, in our culture at least, to the extent that we're following our culture, we tend to choose work predominantly for status and or pay. But if Sayers is right, and if Genesis is hinting at the dignity of work for us, we do not need to pursue work principally or ultimately for its status or its pay. Rather, you and I can pursue work that is fitting for our skills and our desires. And, as we talk typically in Bible class, and I've learned a little bit about what you guys want to do with your lives, it is so fun to hear the various and different things that you desire to do. And many of you are so excited to do that work that seems to be kind of deep in your soul that you want to move out into the world and engage in. But here I would also caution you with perhaps some other darker corners of your heart that may desire to do work simply to get a big enough paycheck to be able to fund the life that you want to live. Rather, work with inherent dignity from God means that you and I can choose to do work that fits us, not work that is simply a means to an end of status or pay. Sayers again says, you and I, we should clamor to be engaged in work that is worth doing. Work that is worth doing, not just work that is a means to some other end of leisure or status or pay. Again, she says, the greatest insult which a commercial age has offered to the worker has been to rob him or her of all interest in the end product of the work, and to force him to dedicate his life to making badly things which were not worth making. Consider that as you embark out on your various careers and pursuits. Are you just doing something to get by and get to the life that you want to get to? Or will you see work with this incredible divine dignity that means the work that you will show up and do every day is not so much about getting on to something else, but it's actually about the work that you're doing. Make something worth making. Do something worth doing. So, not only is work designed by God, He's a worker. He invites us into working with the world that He has made to produce beauty and order and goodness from it. But that means that work has a dignity to it that transcends classes. It transcends, in some sense, abilities and skills. The simplest of work has just as much value and dignity as the most complicated of work. The most skilled work has no more dignity than the most unskilled work done well. Think about how magnificent this is. Even some of you that have jobs right now that are on the lower end of the totem pole should take incredible joy in doing good work well. So to kind of summarize what we've said today, here are three implications of this concept of the dignity of work. First, we have the freedom to seek work that suits our gifts and passions. We do not need to be slaves to money. God has promised to take care of us. We do not need to be slaves to reputation and status because God has promised to take care of us there as well. We have the freedom to pursue work that suits our gifts and passions because every kind of work is filled with dignity from the Lord. Secondly, we need not feel superior or inferior depending on the job we have. I think this is an incredibly powerful temptation and problem in our culture right now. It can be easy in having jobs that would seem to be on the lower end of the reputable spectrum. Perhaps not a business owner or a manager, but a simple everyday worker. It can be so easy to feel inferior. And conversely, as a manager or a business owner or some other kind of work, one can tend to feel superior, proud, higher, bigger, better than those below you. But we see God valuing, appreciating, and smiling upon all different kinds of work. And so inferiority and superiority are thrown out the door with this concept of the dignity of all kinds of work. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, we can view our ordinary work as service to God just as much as the missionary or pastor. This is getting at, I think, a problem in our evangelical, our Christian understandings of work. We often tend to view, quote, more explicitly spiritual kinds of work as more inherently valuable, as though being a pastor is more of God's work than any other kind of work. But that is simply not true, and that's one of the things that Sayers picks up in her essay that you're going to read this week. Rather, every single kind of work in the world done well to the service and glory of God is devotion to Him and service to Him just as much as the missionary or pastor. That doesn't mean everyone is serving God equally. It means everyday, ordinary, Monday to Friday work has just as much potential to be service to God as what you might call Sunday morning work or missionary work. That's incredible. God and His Word do not just have something to say about our praise and worship on Sunday morning, but the other, as Sayers says, 9/10 of our lives are actually governed and shaped and valued by God as well. He values our work. He prizes our work. He invites us to work for Him. There is no secular work versus sacred work. Rather, there's a sense in which all work has the potential to be devotion to God. So, work is not only designed by God, but He has made it with great dignity, from the lowest to the greatest, the most menial to the most skilled, from the bathroom cleaner to the CEO. All kinds of work are made by God with inherent and, in some sense, equal dignity, so that we can devote ourselves to God in whatever kind of work He has made us to do. Don't forget to read your essay and write using Sayers' thoughts. I miss you all. Let me know if you have any questions or needs.